Welcome back, everyone. I found out recently that apparently most podcasts don't make it past episode 20. So I'm appreciating the support that you've been sharing with me to motivate me to keep going with this. And I understand why many people don't continue with the podcast because it is a lot of work. But I believe in this project and I already have many more episodes to share with you and into 2026 and more to come. And I want to let you know that today's episode involves the theme of domestic violence. So if that's too activating for you at this time, then maybe listen when you're feeling more resourced. Although it does have a very happy ending, I must say. And you know what, everyone, violence in relationship is typically really hard to speak about. There's a lot of internalized shame that comes with it, including for the victim of the violence in that circumstance. When it's about male violence, a woman absorbs his pain and internalizes that onto herself typically. And she's judged in society if she mentions that it's happened. And very frequently, people make immediate assumptions like, what did she do? What did she say to warrant that behavior from him? As though there is something that could be done or said to deserve being assaulted, which is a very flawed way of thinking, isn't it? And when it happens, when it actually happens, it can be over something so small and so neutral, even because violence in relationship is rarely about a real actual situation. It's coming from someone's internal war inside of him, especially, yeah, in this situation. And then that gets externalized. Yeah. And it's not always a direct cause and effect for that reason. For example, a woman can be imbalanced in her inner masculine energy rather than overbearing in her masculine energy and still not deserve violence from a man. So having an underactive masculine inside of her is making her susceptible to male violence, but it doesn't mean she did something wrong to deserve it. This is a really important point that I constantly see and have been seeing for many years. People get confused about. Because the thing is, a healthy man wouldn't be attracted to a woman who's in that place. And most likely that wouldn't be the case. And so it's not like a good or a great man can suddenly become an abuser based on a woman's imbalanced internal energy, especially if she's not enacting it out. A man is who he is because of him, because of his standards, because of his own alignment, his own agreements with himself. So when a conscious woman, like today's guest, owns her experience in her awakening process, it doesn't mean that she's blaming herself or accepting responsibility for her past partner's behaviors or in any way saying that it was warranted. I think it's easy for some people to think that when it comes to violence in relationship, male violence in particular, that it's just some women that go through it and that they are a small minority of the population. But actually, it's been extremely common in various world cultures, including being very prevalent in the Western world. And some women are full on assaulted for years, and some experience it once and then leave, and some sense aggression building towards them to a point where they bow out before it has a chance to happen. And in many of these cases, those women don't make it into the statistics because unless it's actually reported, it doesn't become a stat, does it? So the information available is that 1 in 3 women have experienced male violence of some type. And But that's not encompassing how much more often it does happen when it's a serious unreported incident, which is unfortunately on the increase, would you believe? Um, and alongside that, there's that minor end of the spectrum that I mentioned that just doesn't get reported at all because the woman just leaves and she moves on without, yeah, making it a legal process. So the stat of 1 in 3 isn't really accurate. It's actually much higher. And the culture of misogyny across the world has been so prevalent that it can easily still be seen when following certain cases in the media, like where men are excused for their behavior because of not having a previous conviction or because of their promising career and they're given light sentences. And the woman's experience and her quality of life is often really overlooked in those cases. And since the Me Too uh, movement, there has been more permission to not overlook male violence in the culture. And that has resulted in a bit less stigma for women to speak up, which means less victim blaming and some increase in support for women in dealing with male violence. I know that in Australia, uh, male violence against women, particularly their partners, was declared an actual emergency in 2024. And unfortunately, the femicide, the homicide rate of men killing their partner or ex-partner has dramatically spiked and increased since then, which is really concerning. And so while Me Too surely has also had its issues and, its flaws, I don't think it should be dismissed entirely because it actually has done some good in highlighting abusive behavior that has been systemic and under the radar of social awareness until around that time when it came out. And I can tell you that 10 plus years ago, it was impossible for a woman to speak out about male violence without being ridiculed for it. So I want to thank Suzannah, today's guest, for her courage, because I've actually heard extreme and all kinds of stories from women about things that have gone on in their relationships. And most of those stories, most of those women are not going to be coming on this podcast to talk about it. It's too damaging, it's too private, it's still a process for them to recover from it. They aren't completely out on the other side, even though it happened some time ago and they might be safe now. They still are not at that place where they can publicly share it like this. And today's guest, Suzannah, she really went through it, and inside this episode, I talk a little bit about aspects of what I've been through too, without going into much detail. Um, but today's guest, if for her it was sustained and intense and ongoing for years, and children were involved, and she felt really stuck in all of that. And the thing is that many women are in that situation. And I think that maybe the best guide of all for them is a woman who's been there exactly and found her way out the other side. So to let that publicly be part of one's story, connected to one's services, is something very specific. And I think coming from a true place of service. And I want to mention as well that we recorded this during monsoon rain on my end. And so the audio is not as clear as it could be. And the episode does cut off at the end. We don't officially say goodbye, but you can see Suzannah's services in the notes. And if you do get something from this episode, please let us know and please share it with a friend. Welcome to this provocative and heartfelt podcast. Here you get to listen in on genuine conversations between female and male leaders from around the world to free yourself in discovering more mutual respect, pleasure, and love in your intimate life, and to find out what it takes to live beyond conditioning and assumptions that hold patriarchal sex in place, and ultimately to be a way shower for the coming generations. My name is Devashi Shakti, and you are warmly welcome to be part of these evolutionary explorations of living beyond patriarchal sex. So, Suzannah, I'm really pleased that you wanted to be here in this conversation with me. I'm so happy we could meet today. And I want to let everyone know that you are known as the Inbodied Woman. That's the name of your services. And I can see that, you've done a lot of different healing modalities. If anyone goes to your social media, they'll see the list of many things that you've done. And like so many women, it's like we explore things for our own healing, don't we? And then when we find something that is really our zone, that's what we tend to hone in on. And so I understand that healing and embodiment, especially for women, right, for women's bodies and for awakening pleasure is a big part of your work. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And yeah, that's exactly where I'm going as my journey has evolved. Yeah, all of the beautiful modalities have weaved together. I'm a deep diver, so everything that felt called to me, I went into, I learned and embodied, and now I get the honor of sharing that and walking with other women.
Yes. Yes, beautiful, beautiful. And the reason I've been aware of you, we haven't even met in person, everyone, by the way, but I just realized before, Susanna was thinking about doing training in the past, that I have taught. But the reason I reached out to you for this, Susanna, was because, well, firstly, you just have such a lovely energy. I've always found you to be so consistent in this beautiful, expansive heart energy that you come from, and a beautiful, mature, warm presence that you have. And I saw very recently, like a couple of weeks ago, you shared publicly, very vulnerably and openly about where your journey was in the past and the fact that you are a survivor of male violence and have been on a big healing journey to be the woman that you are now, doing the work in the world that you do now. So we'll get into your story in a few moments, but let's start with your definition, and feel free to just let it roll, of what patriarchal sex is. Like if you had to put it into words, because we all have a sense of what it is, even if you've never heard the term before this podcast, right? So what would be the definition of it to you?
Mm. For me, what's coming through is what we've been conditioned to believe sex is, or what we haven't been educated and even disconnected. To me, it's disconnected sex.
Yes, yes. It's very simple when put like that, because that certainly is what it is.
Yeah.
And we were discussing, what we were going to share in your episode here, and the effects that patriarchal sex has on women. The work that you do addresses this as well. So you mentioned how patriarchal sex disconnects women from their bodies,
Mhm.
obviously, yes, but how it turns women into something to perform or
Mhm.
please.
Yeah.
Do you care to elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this has been my entire own personal journey of reclaiming my sacred sexuality from only knowing patriarchal sex. So I grew up in a very small country town where that was all I knew. That was the way women were spoken about. That was, my first sexual experience was non-consensual. So from the very beginning, I disconnected and disassociated from my body. And that was then the, ongoing process for me was complete disconnection, complete disassociation. And I thought that then I was simply to please a man. I would perform, I would please, I would do what I had seen in pornography. I would, being in the violent relationships in particular, one of them, I would do what I felt I needed to appease him for my safety. And that was some horrific things that my body had to endure. And I had to just, I had to zone out. I had to not be there for what was happening to me on those occasions and many others where, from such a young age, it was 15 from my first non-consensual experience, that from then on, I essentially even thought that love was what came through this kind of sex and sought that out as well. Not having any understanding of my body, my feminine anatomy, the way a body is supposed to actually truly be in soft receptivity, when mine was actually always tensed and clenching and, almost, gripping for what was to come.
Yes. Firstly, I'm so sorry that
Mm,
you went through that. And
mm,
15 is such a tender age,
yeah,
of identity and exploration and basically playing out the karma that's been handed to us, right? And trying to find our way through that. And
mm,
so, um, if you were going to share about if you were to paint a picture of what patriarchal sex was actually like so that other women listening can realize, oh, yeah, maybe I've been through that as well, like scenarios or the themes, as
mhm.
much as you feel comfortable to share.
Yeah, of course. For me, in my experience, it felt like sex wasn't actually about pleasure. It felt like the patriarchal sex was more of a, um, what's the word? An obligation a lot of the time. It was my obligation to keep my man happy. My pleasure didn't necessarily happen, even so long as his pleasure happened. His pleasure came first. So long as he was satisfied, that's what the main goal was. Also, the other part about the patriarchal sex, I feel, and in my experience, was that it was just to, don't like the sound of it nowadays because I'm all about sacred sexuality, is to get off, or to take a load off, or to, the pressure, or to unwind. It was used more as a tool, as a stress reliever. Honestly, what it felt like, and it sounds horrible, is, mutual masturbation, really, using two bodies with friction, to please or to, and even then on my own perspective, it was my way of feeling loved. It was my way of knowing that the man wanted me. It was my way of, knowing that I was worthy enough, pretty enough, all of these things that I hadn't learned along my journey. So I handed over my power to a man and let him essentially, just do what he wanted with my body in this way, rather than knowing how to honor my body, rather than listening to her messages, rather than, allowing her to open and soften. It was, yeah, the absolute opposite.
Yes. Yeah, when treated like that so young, when you don't know anything, you don't have any prior experience to go on and no training and no real education, no embodied role models, right? You're in this small country town in Australia
Mhm.
and born into the situation that you're born into, and it just is what it is. And it feels like, doesn't it, that this is just what sex is. This is what relationship is. This is what it's like to relate with a man, right? And when you have that experience or yeah, repetitive one especially, it's a big assumption that's made, isn't it? Like, this is how it goes. I just need to do my best within this scenario, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's, yeah, the way it is in, particularly, I don't know the rest of the world, but particularly in the small country towns, and the country where that's, that's all that they've known as well. And it just continues to get passed down through the cycles. That as well as the generational things that came through, for me in particular, was a lot of so much generational trauma, even around the sexuality side as well, which was passed down and through as well that I've had to work through. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's very deeply multi-layered. Yeah.
Totally, totally. And I have my own journey with this as well. But my curiosity is going right now to the link between patriarchal sex and domestic violence.
Mhm.
I lived through that also.
Mhm.
How do you feel like you or women are susceptible to domestic violence as a result of patriarchal sex, if we connect those dots in your experience?
Yeah. From my personal experience, I felt so disempowered. Like I felt like I didn't have a choice. I felt like my choices were taken away. I felt like the man is above me. He holds all the power, essentially. And, because of that first experience, excuse me, nice little clearing. Um, because of that first non-consensual experience, I feel that led me also into the path of continuing to allow men to mistreat me. So in one instance, it happened and I froze. And then in every instance, I continued to freeze, disassociate, and numb in so many different ways, which led me to, I feel, then being more susceptible to the violence. From men, because in that disassociating and numbing, it's again, so it's quite nuanced where I then didn't feel like I had a voice, I couldn't speak up, I didn't have any power. A man, essentially had the right, I felt, to do what he pleased. So I feel that definitely disempowers women. That's probably the biggest key part for me.
Yeah, totally. Thank you for your vulnerability and honesty in sharing this, because it's so important for people to connect those dots,
Mm,
and at 15 and even a bit older than that, it's just such a vulnerable and receptive time. Like, you had the understanding that he had the right to do these things because he would have had that understanding that it was his right to do what
mhm,
he wanted and do those things. And when you're so young and vulnerable and receptive and you're just so wanting to love and connect, and
mhm,
this is the way to be close and intimate with a man, it's understandable that that imprinting really sets in.
mm,
And so it's important for everyone to realize how closely associated those two things are, patriarchal sex and domestic violence. But the more I delve into this research, this focus, and the more women like yourself and I who are living well beyond patriarchal sex and have been for some time, um, patriarchal sex is violence,
mhm,
is something that I think people are a little bit afraid to name.
mm,
And like truly, I mean, if we feel into the impressions that the guys that you were with in your younger years, in these relationships that you were in, where would they have gotten their sex education? Where would they have gotten that programming to assume that that's how they should relate with you and your body?
mhm,
It's likely the same place every other guy gets it,
mhm,
which is like a socially acceptable violence against women being porn
yeah,
that I mean it's obviously hidden, it's not completely openly accepted, and yet it is at the same time.
mhm,
And I think that people are very reluctant to name it for what it is. And the common typical scenario when it's unquestioned, unchecked, um, is in itself a form of violence. It's can be pretty revelationary to have that awareness, but it takes being well on the other side of it usually to
mhm.
see it that damn clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't have recognized any of this, even just over a decade ago. when I was really deeply beginning
Right.
my journey, I would have, it's still such a sensitive and taboo topic, as you know, in this work. And, speaking up about it. I mean, where I still live now is not, it's much bigger than where I grew up, but it's still a smaller town or city. I still am so far from the norm here in the way I do things, sacred sexuality, honoring your body. I'm the tiny little minority where I am here now as well.
Yes.
Mm.
There's so much information about sacred sexuality that is available these days.
Mhm.
And like a lot of people are getting involved in teaching about this and offering services around that, right? But
Mhm.
what I see from being in this field for so long is that people aren't necessarily connecting the dots of how related these things are. So the shadow experiences, the shadow masculine and feminine experiences, like what you've been through, what I've been through, and how that, like, it's like sacred sexuality is in a completely separate category or area of life, and these domestic violence experiences, people tend to look at them, if they haven't been through it, as something completely alien and unrelated and just not even relevant.
Mhm.
And I feel like it's so incredibly important to really get, how sacred sexuality is not just this optional, luxurious practice that you can do it as one particular style and then you can go back to your, unconscious style. People can treat it like that sometimes, right? So I'm just really wanting to highlight how these things are actually connected. Like there's a trajectory um,
I love.
from yeah, from our karmic conditioned states
Mhm. Mhm.
to what it's like when we're actually in our post-healing phase and we're integrated and we're embodied and we're grounded.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I love
Yeah.
that. I think it's really valuable and important. And I'm yeah, happy to dive deeper into the shadow if because that helps highlight the light. Absolutely. I mean, because
Yeah.
that was probably how old am I? That's probably the vast majority of my life. My experience as a woman in this lifetime has been the opposite, has been in the shadow, was in the patriarchal way and experience.
Right.
So it's been, as much as it feels like lifetimes now, once you get into this beautiful place, that is where I have experienced most of life. So,
Wow, wow. And it kind of stands out. Like your post really stood out to me rather because you were just so grounded about your experience, and obviously it's much easier to talk about it when you're well on the other side, like you are. But not everyone is willing to openly share on a
mm,
public level what happened. And I find that the people that can are really quite a long way forward in their healing journey.
mhm.
So maybe I'll just start with asking you this. How does it feel to be able to talk so openly about the shadow experiences that have happened to you?
Yeah, for me, being able to speak about the shadow experiences and speak about anything nowadays since reclaiming my voice is really liberating, completely freeing and healing. And I know that it's not just for me. So the first time I ever spoke out about um, domestic violence that was happening to me in my life, I think it was about 2016, and it was the scariest thing in the world to let anyone know what had been happening for a decade in my life, to fear speaking out about judgment, ridicule, blame, the shame, the guilt, the actual real fear of him potentially killing me was a real fear for me, and speaking up because I'd lived a life in fear of my life. And the first time I spoke up it wasn't even for me. I said to myself, if this helps one woman, if speaking up and sharing my message helps one other woman leave, save herself, save her children, then it is worth it for me. And so then that allowed me to keep taking that step each time when something came through. So now, it doesn't come with the big fear layers as such, but it comes with a freedom layer when I do it. Like sometimes a bit of nervousness when I write it out and I go, wow, that's really raw, that's really deep, but that's me. That's my journey. That's who I am. And I didn't walk through this for nothing. I walked this path for a reason to share my messages and this story so it can help other women. So yeah, I find it really inspiring when I see other women sharing their stories vulnerably as well, because it really is medicine for all of us.
I 100% agree. And I'm so happy we went into this a little further because your answer then is just so brilliant. And it's going to highlight so much of why what we're about to talk about is so damn important. And it's really true. There can be a lot of shame, right, as a survivor of
Oh, so
violence, just like there can be a lot of shame for the perpetrator of violence to have to acknowledge their behavior and their impact. But there's
mhm.
also shame for the one who's been on the receiving end of it in that very physical way.
Oh,
And
absolutely. That was,
I know, and I understand from,
sorry, you finished, Ellen.
oh, the internet glitched. Yeah, I know from my own experience as well, Susanna, that it takes so much internally to be
Mm,
able to own it publicly and
mhm,
allow it to be an offering
mhm,
and let it come from that place where you're not using that expression for your healing. You're on the other side of your healing. You're
mhm,
saying you're doing it for that one woman, even, just like you said,
mhm,
right? And it's coming from such a different place when it's
yeah,
spoken in that way. And
mhm,
I'm saying this because I understand that there are still quite a few people out there that feel reactive around the vulnerability and rawness of sharing what the hell actually goes on inside people's lives behind closed doors,
mm.
because it is actually more common than people think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And
That was a huge catalyst for me in sharing because I went so deep into understanding, into the psychology of domestic violence because I'm a mum, I have children, and that I didn't want that cycle repeated for them. So I went so deeply into learning
yes,
so that I could understand the way our brains are wired from it so that I could break the cycle for my children. Like I didn't really feel like I had the strength to break out of this cycle, but I wanted to do it for my children because
yeah,
the amount of guilt, like we said, shame, blame, all of those feelings that we have for staying in the relationship, as you know, because you've experienced it also, um, you know, that eats you up inside as much as anything. Keeping it a secret from people. Like I was actually a personal trainer while this was going on, and my business, my first business I started was called Empower Fitness for Women, empowering your inner self. So little did I know now, reflecting back, I was not just empowering the women in my, trainings to be strong. I was literally empowering myself and building myself up to be stronger. And that was the catalyst to me leaving.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow, wow. Yes. And both of us have been in and are still in sort of spiritual conscious community circles. And, you would think that the vulnerability and courage that it takes to share stories would be well received, but it's not always the case. It wasn't always the case for me, and I've observed similar for other people. And so
Mhm,
that's why I wanted to highlight this part here around sharing on the other side of trauma
mhm,
and having the courage to name these hidden, supposedly shameful places that,
mhm.
unless we do share about them, the shame lingers,
Yeah.
and their internal identity sometimes doesn't fully shift.
Mhm,
Yeah. So
mhm,
thank you for your bravery. Thank you for your courage. And let's go a little more now into intimacy and relationship on the wider intimacy level, because you said something really interesting in our notes before, which I really recognize as truth. And I saw that you wrote, what many call intimacy is often trauma in disguise.
Yeah. Mhm.
Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so that was, speaking to my own personal experience of the relationships that I had. So from the time that I left home at 15, as well, ran away, obviously, with so much going on in my life and my the trauma I was experiencing. And that catapulted me through from relationship to relationship. And what I was walking through was unhealthy codependent relationship after the next unhealthy codependent relationship. And as equally the intimacy that was happening, because each relationship was essentially a different form of a trauma bond, then the intimacy that I had was not actually true intimacy. It wasn't loving, it wasn't looking into someone's eyes, it wasn't from the heart at all. It was a clinging, it was a disconnected, it was, I don't think I ever had my eyes open, to be honest. It was so trauma formed rather than actually the beauty opened, expressed way that it truly should be. So that was, yeah, from my personal experience and from working with a lot of women, speaking with a lot of women, the amount of women that I still talk to or work with and walk through from the numbness in their body. They've still got numbness in their body, but we're walking through the
Yes.
process of what we perceive it to be intimacy. But if you're numb and disconnected from your body, to me, that's still a trauma response. We're still just,
Yes.
bringing those bodies together.
It's really, really true. And, the embodiment journey is a continual unraveling in a lot of ways. There might be like the depths of the shadowlands that we get born into sometimes, like it sounds like you and I did at least. um, you might be over that. You might not be replicating that the same as before. But if I say what I see in my one-on-one clients, for example, like over and over again, even though they're not in some massive trauma cycle, like karmic cycle, it's just those places, exactly like you mentioned, Susanna, dormancy in their body, places in their bodies that haven't really had the light of consciousness poured into them. They're inactive, then they're not activated, they are dormant. And even if it's just like a small moment, like you might be so aware and conscious actually in your life and a lot of things going really well, and including relationship, but there can be moments, even not the whole thing, but moments in time of sexual intimacy, emotional intimacy, the
Mhm.
whole relationship pattern in general can start to show those places,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
really.
so, what would you like to share around why embodiment is such an important tool to stay connected to, experience, to continually unravel with?
Mhm.
Yeah, in order to just keep moving forward, like well beyond patriarchal sex.
Mhm. Oh, this is everything. Embodiment is everything to me because I was essentially the disconnected, disassociated woman, and now I'm the embodied woman because my entire path and journey along reclaiming each part of me and, shifting through each layer of shadow, each layer of density within my body, my womb, reclaiming my womb and my yoni through embodied practices, somatic practices, has absolutely shifted, the entire trajectory of not just my life, but my children's life. This was bigger than me. It was originally for them. And then I just continue to go deeper into the work. And then that leads me on the path of, doing the work for other women because we are such beautiful, sensual, emotional feeling beings. Yet we've got such a vast majority of the planet running around disconnected and in their mind, and there's nothing below it. And we can live this beautiful, pleasure-filled life or feeling life. It's not always pleasure, it's just a feeling life of allowing all the sensations, and connecting so deeply to the innate wisdom of our body, allowing our body's intelligence to come through. And if we're not connected to our body, if we're not walking the embodied path, how on earth can we listen to our intuition? How can we be guided by our body's yeses and nos? How can we, I don't know, to me, we just can't. We cannot live a life. when we're not embodied. That's all there is to it for me. That's why this is the path and the work. And this is, I just want all women and men, of course, but I work predominantly with women. I just want all women to be able to come home to themselves, to feel that unconditional love that's in their heart, to know the power in their womb and their yoni and their voice, being able to open, express, and then claim the desires they truly want in life and the pleasure and the intimacy and the love that they want in life. Ah, I
So
could go
beautifully,
on and on.
passionately said. Yes, 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 I understand, and I love, this force of aliveness inside of you that was not allowed to be felt and embodied and experienced and expressed, and here it all is now. It's so
Oh yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
And
yes.
Susanna, before we go into sacred sexuality, I wanted to talk on another point that you were bringing up in our notes about when inner feminine and masculine is not united, how
Mhm,
that can attract wounded patterns in
mhm.
sex intimacy and relating. So, what are some important things that you like to share with people around that inner union, masculine, feminine, inside?
Yeah, this has been the biggest part of of my journey in creating that inner harmony and union because I had no awareness. I didn't realize that underneath the surface, I was playing out both the wounded masculine and the wounded feminine. There was an internal war within me, as I went deeper on my journey. And then obviously that was reflecting in my outer reality. So obviously the wounded men or masculine that I kept attracting into my field was because of my internal energy as well. And I don't say that from a blame standpoint. I just say that on, those deeper levels of understanding and awareness. And it wasn't just playing out in my relationships. I started seeing it playing out with my son. So this was a huge, huge leap
Wow.
for me to go so deeply because he had experienced and been around and in the relationships when I was in the violence. So he had then taken on some of the conditioning and patterning of that. And that started showing up in his teen years in my reality with him standing up and, fronting me at one or two stages. And that dynamic coming through. And that was the most heartbreaking thing as a mother to be feeling the energy of my perpetrator coming through in my son. And I was really gutted and heartbroken in those moments and, not really knowing what to do. And then as I do, I'm a deep diver. I just kept diving deeper. And I did. I reached out to some of my beautiful men in my circle and looked deeper within again at what threads within me, what threads are here within me because earlier on in my journey, it had been, looking at the external or looking at, what does he need to fix or what do we need to help him fix was the way I'd viewed it earlier on because, if behavioral patterns come through in the masculine in anger or, emotions that are coming through that they don't have the emotional capacity to express in a healthy way, then that was coming through and all signs and fingers point from the schooling system to, he needs help. Well, yes, he absolutely did, but not in the way of just take him off to a psychologist. It was more, I needed to, or we needed to address it within us. And the more that I came home to healing my masculine heart, to actually letting go of the layers that I didn't realize there was still some I was holding against the masculine. As you know, it's such a deep journey and process of forgiveness, of releasing and shifting through when we've had so much happen to us. So for me, it was really about first of all healing it for me and my son, and then also for myself to have those healthy masculine relationships reflected in my reality, as well as the feminine. It was probably the most confronting part for me was confronting my unhealthy feminine, was seeing some of the cycles, patterns, and generational things that had been passed down, and actually taking responsibility and accountability for the ways in which I had shown up, reacted, and created parts in my journey. And again, I don't say that with any blame on myself. Like I don't accept or condone the violence, the rape, or anything that has ever happened to me. But I do take the responsibility and ownership of, the wounding and the hurt that flowed down generationally for me on both sides. I was equally operating out of unhealthy masculine and feminine. I definitely had the the martyr, the mothering, that side of me. I definitely had the emasculator in there, and that broke my heart when I saw that thread within myself, and actually had to sit with that and go, oh, I've hurt people too. I've hurt men too. So that was
Yes.
for me such a catalyst to going deeper, understanding, and clearing out the density, deeper levels of awareness, love, and self acceptance. My gosh, the amount of compassion, love, and self acceptance to give myself along the way, to merge them back in, to welcome them back into my heart in harmony. And then to have that reflected on the outer, and to be in, now for almost 3 years, the divine union that I am in is like the gift and the cherry on top of, why I've walked this path, why I do this journey, as well as the ripples that flow out in my family, with my children, with my son, with my daughter as well, so that their relating patterns can be different, so that they can have life with less pain than I did. That doesn't mean they'll be pain free. I know they're here on their journeys and their soul contracts also. But, if I could make that shift and break the chains in some ways for them and the ripples of their lives, my life, and then all the beautiful people that I get the honor of working with as well, then, yeah, it's so worth it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm really happy that you went there and shared like the deeper inner shadow work around masculine, feminine inner healing,
Mhm.
because again, having been in this field so long, it's like I see trends that move through the culture, right? And at the moment, it seems to be to me a really quite superficial interpretation of polarity teachings that
Mhm.
are being taught by people that haven't really deconstructed patriarchy inside of them, firstly, which means meeting those shadow masculine, feminine inside. Because, like yourself, my, yeah, like quite young, I had to start. Because I would say the first 17 years of my life were me attempting to live through this intense karmic, chaos that I was born into. And it was kind of hell for the first 17 years of my life, actually. Um, and probably the first really deepening place around actually changing that template, that imprint that I'd been given, was taking in these ancient sacred teachings of masculine and feminine in a very therapeutic way, and very similar to what like you're saying, where if that was the type of man that I was interacting with, that is a symbol of my inner masculine, or what was resonating at that time as my inner masculine. And so the more I dove in on a very internal level to shift reality from the inside out,
Mhm.
my life was never, ever like that again. Like less and less, and then just completely different.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, some of what I'm seeing in what's being interpreted of polarity teachings, with slogans going around like make women and feminine again, and thinking that it's, you
Yeah.
know, women deepening in their feminine is this license to control and subjugate women again, that there's a growing trend of that. And unfortunately, part of my big concern and a massive motivation for this entire research podcast and book is actually about the future of
Mhm.
what the young men and women are going to be dealing with because of this misunderstanding, because of this um, skipping over some really important inner places of therapeutic healing, actually. Like, I see a lot of men saying at the moment that they believe that their vulnerability is not welcome and they should never show it. Like this is very manosphere type of stuff, right? And they think it's so undesirable to women. So it's like they're telling themselves they have to completely 100% occupy the masculine energy and always
Mm,
be in control. And when a relationship is so polarized, which is the opposite of what you're talking about, right? Because your understanding is like mine, where the more our inner feminine and masculine come into healing and wholeness, that
mm,
reflection shows up on the outside. Understanding is that if I am the woman, I have to be totally feminine, totally ultra feminine, and let the man be completely the masculine. Like that is actually the perfect storm for a toxic, abusive relationship, in my understanding. And
mm,
so there is no real true deeper intimacy if it's not about sharing your journey as a woman of your inner masculine and feminine, like you're experiencing that and you're sharing from that, and your partner is also doing the same. So like
mm,
the real intimacy between two people can only come from that deeper inner place where you're already having it with yourself, right?
mm,
Like it's not our other half, it's two
mm.
people in their wholeness together, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that you've shared that part because, yeah, I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago, along my yearning for deeper relationship healing and divine union, I did start going into some of the polarity teachings. And after a little bit of a dive into the rabbit hole, I pulled out. I pulled out of it because not all, but a lot. It was leading me to feel that I then did have to be in that feminine, and that's not me, and that's not true for me. And so I'm so discerning with whatever teachings I look at now, and I just always bring in whatever I look at and go, is this right or true for me? Because, as you know, the whole of the feminine is the entire spectrum. She is the dark goddess, she is the light goddess. Today I had some Kali energy coming through, and my fire, I'm quite a fiery woman as well, but equally I'm a beautiful, soft, receptive, open-hearted, vulnerable, beautiful woman. So it's encapsulating all of her in harmony and union, bringing her home to wholeness in my heart with my inner masculine.
If you value the messages being shared here, please do follow and subscribe because it helps enormously to get this podcast in front of new listeners around the world, to show people that this controversial message is something they can trust, and to bring prominent speakers into this unique conversation. Leaving a review helps a lot too, and I would personally love to read what you are getting out of this. May we all be courageous in elevating ourselves beyond division and be free from suffering.
In their beautiful union, and equally for my partner. Like, how hard would it be to be in a union if he wasn't allowed to share vulnerably because he just had to stand strong in his masculine? Where, obviously being such deep feeling women, we already know what's going on. And then if they didn't have a space to share that within our connection, to me, that would breed more disconnection, not more closeness and intimacy. So, yeah, it's definitely something that's been
Yes.
coming through for me.
So, because you are experiencing that, Susanna, you are experiencing sacred union.
Mm.
Let's segue into that because, yeah, I'm so happy for you that you haven't gotten stuck in those places. You caught it, you saw it, and you moved yourself out of it.
Mm.
So, what more can you share around how you were able to have the experience that you're having now with sacred union?
Yeah, so for me, as we've said a bit in the journey, like more my initiation into it was the polar opposite, learning through all that contrast, first of all, was the absolute pain and hell. Like I lived through hell for 30 years,
Oh,
always in relationship, in, unhealthy dynamics, in all of the violence and things we've spoken of, but also in the loneliness because I wasn't actually even truly meeting myself. So everything I was actually deeply yearning for that wasn't being met, to be seen, to be heard, to be held, to be loved unconditionally, to be worshipped and honored, all the things I was deeply yearning for, I actually, I wasn't even giving to myself because I didn't know how. So the journey began for me through huge heartbreak, through huge, I call it a universal alignment, of course, was when my body did completely shut down. I had to have emergency back surgery. I couldn't walk, I couldn't work, I
Wow.
couldn't move because I'd always been a personal trainer and yoga teacher. Movement had always been my thing. So I couldn't move. I had no choice in bed, completely, not able to do anything for myself. On top of that heartbreak of the relationship, I felt was a beautiful, deep soul connection on top. So it was like this was the last point of really digging into those wounds that needed to be healed. I had nowhere to run, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but face myself so deeply and go in. I joke about it now because I'm so far on the other side, but I remember my mum being down here to help care for me and my family, my children, because as I said, could not move, couldn't do anything, and was just in excruciating pain. And I decided then to dive so deeply into relating. I started a course, 2 weeks out of hospital, and I was crying hysterically, going into these deep dives of understanding myself, my relationship patterns. My mother walks in and says, "Do you really think this is the best time to be doing this?" And I'm just like, "When is there a better time?" You know, and I'm, just a mess, an absolute mess. And in I go because I was like, no more. This was my line in the sand. Like, I'm not having this again. I will do whatever it takes. And that's when I really, really came home to the deepest unconditional love along this journey, to the deepest boundaries on myself and my body that no one will have access to me, my body, my heart, any of it, unless it is from this place of absolute, beautiful, divine love. And when I decided that for myself, that's also when everything shifts around me, when it's, I'm not available for anything less than divine love and union. And of course, there was a few trials and, some bits still to even out in my energetic field along the way. And of course, it is the most blissful, beautiful, safe, supportive evolution, because I was calling it in for those other parts of my evolution. And equally, it is, I liken it, I think I did write a big post on this a while ago. I liken my sacred union to like an ayahuasca journey or plant medicine.
Yes.
Yeah, like I wrote a post saying I don't need plant medicines anymore because I have a sacred union. Because
Yes.
there's nothing you can hide from. Everything will come to the surface, things that you weren't even aware. So I called this in because I felt like I journeyed so deeply within myself and was ready for this beautiful, loving, divine union. And then I laugh at myself because when it came, we had a week that I coined Hell Week because we had to meet each other's shadows. We were dancing in the shadows for a whole week, and it felt so hard and not what I wanted from a divine union, but equally, we had to stay. Can we meet each other? Can we not follow our old patterns because we're both runners? Can we lean in when it's uncomfortable? Can we have the hard conversations? And can we continue to love each other unconditionally when we see all of what you are? And can you love me when I bring all of my fire? Because there's a lot there when it comes through. And through continuing to meet those parts of self, we continue to evolve higher. We continue to be able to meet the depths of love, of the sacred sexuality. Like we get lost in divine lovemaking portals of deliciousness, and I merge with the divine, and it's, you know.
Yes. It's
Yeah.
the best.
Yeah, it's just, and then it's like, how could I have ever had anything else? But also, would I have known or had the depths of this experience if it wasn't for the polar opposite contrast of what my life once was. So then the gratitude that I feel, the bliss that I feel, the love that everything, like I just feel sometimes I'm going to have it explode out of me and dissipate into little bits of light, which feels like it does sometimes in this beautiful union. So yeah, it truly is the most beautiful journey that I could ever have taken. And, I just want every woman and every man to be able to know what is actually truly available to them. To, stop this, we're in a society where people can pick up a phone and flick past people, and then, something triggers them and they can just go pick up the phone and flick for another person rather than actually having a conversation. So, what they're actually truly missing out on, this divine gift of what we actually were born into or incarnated into, and the capacity that we have to feel such great depths of love. I want to scream this to the masses.
Yes, yes, and you did, and thank you. It's I love it. I love it. And because you referenced your sacred union relationship as like an ayahuasca ceremony for
Mm.
the, let's say, the women out there, especially because I know what's in the psyches and experiences of women having worked with them for so long, right? So I'm thinking of women that I've worked with before who might be like, but how's that different to a trauma bond, right? Like where you're constantly in the shadow realm. So I'm so happy to hear you say you had a hell week. It's not the entire experience of your relationship. So
No.
what can you say to differentiate those? Because I get that you're not in a trauma bond,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yes.
So the difference for me is, first of all, the level of safety that was already in this union. So I came into this union knowing what I wanted also. I came into this union with relationship values. I came into this union with knowing my needs, and the number one was safety for me. So this, first of all, before we got into Hell Week or any of the times we've gone into our shadows, I knew and had felt and committed to a man that was safe with my heart, safe with my emotions. There is such a vast difference in us, and our level of, both of us, awareness and consciousness, to be able to meet the parts within ourselves. Not always instantly. Sometimes, we're still doing life, we still get busy, there can still be triggers, and we're still human. But we will take ourselves off and sit with ourselves, and we will come back and lean in and have a repair. So, things like repair didn't exist in my previous life. So having the conversation and taking the self responsibility for, say, I've had a day that got on top of me, or, part of my subconscious old part has come back through and I've snapped. I have the awareness now to take space for myself and to come back and to own it, to absolutely own it. This is something that I could never do in past relationships either, because I was also never wrong. I can come back and be like, my love, I'm really sorry I spoke to you that way. Like, I don't want to speak to you that way. I just hadn't had space for myself, and I needed time, to myself first to rejuvenate before I came into this conversation. So the level of healthy communication and conversations now that comes from it is the absolute reason why it's the polar opposite of unhealthy or trauma bonds. The way that we both choose to continue to do the work, the way that we both do our own work as well. It's not just we do it all together. We both do our own work and our own journeys. We have our own support teams and people. And then equally, we do our stuff together in relationship and in tantra, and deepening into that as well.
Yes, yes. And just in case anyone listening is not like super clear on what a trauma bond is, I just want to briefly say that it's like the constant up and down, constant going into shadow or even going into a high, or
Mm,
being kind of neutral and then dipping down into the shadow lands. And it just never really stops, never really ends. And
yeah.
usually that's because there is not enough internal safety as an individual established, and not
Mm,
enough of that in each other to have it together.
mm,
So one of the things that um, occurs to me visually when I hear you talk about your sacred union relationship is this field of energy between the two of you that
mm,
you are both consciously tending to and growing like a garden.
mm,
Whereas in the karmic cycle of the trauma bond, it's like you're just in this drama field of directly projecting onto each other, and it's just th this sacred field of energy between the two of you isn't fully being nurtured and cultivated. Like it's not the focus. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And that is our higher truth is love. So there's us and there's love. And it's always how do we always say, like, how quickly can we come back to love rather than
Yes.
past patterns, rather than the other cycles, rather than turning away? How quickly can we come back to love and connection is our number one
Yes.
things as well. Mm.
Yes, and so much emotional safety, emotional resiliency, repair skills, like you mentioned, super important to
Yeah.
reconnecting to that coherency field that we've mentioned, and
Hmm.
having a vision, that you want to return, stay in love, return to love itself, have that be the guiding frequency in
Oh,
the
yeah.
connection, is what I'm hearing you say, yeah?
Yeah, we know our high purpose. Like we were brought together to share unconditional and divine love with the world. My love and I also do some work together in offerings, which is beautiful because we get to hold the masculine, feminine pillars and show what our real love and union can be as well. And equally, I share vulnerably about our relating journey and what we go through so that people do understand because I feel I almost pedestaled the divine union as, just being this beautiful, loving presence, which it is. But it's not until you get into it and you really have to face off with the harder parts that you understand, like, it is work. You do have to work for it to be beautiful, but it is so worth it in every way.
Yes, yes. And I'm so happy that you feel called, and both of you, by the sound of it, feel called to guide and to teach, because there seems to be a really kind of romantic and, like you said, a big projection onto divine union, which it's almost like people are trying to claim it as a relationship status before they've actually cultivated that frequency, either in themselves or with each other. So it's like there's a bit of delusion around it in the field that I'm noticing
Yeah.
socially.
Yeah, go
And
through
so,
Hell Week first and then see if you want to claim it.
yes, so I'd love to hear about what you and your beloved are offering. But just before we go there, to wind up, sacred sexuality in
Mhm.
your relationship.
Mhm.
You mentioned these beautiful lovemaking experiences. Is
Mhm.
there anything else that you can say? Like, I'm thinking of the women listening who may not be in a total hell period of their life, but they might just be, in something where they're pretty much tolerating, accepting patriarchal sex, and they're just assuming that that's how it's going to be. And what
Mm.
more can you share around how worthwhile it is, or
Oh
or
my
what
gosh.
it's like for you to experience the other side?
I'm just breathing through the contraction because every time you bring up about they're just settling for like my body and my yoni contracts. And so I'm just like, oh, that doesn't feel nice. So it's like, oh, what more can I share? Why it's worth it. Um,
And
oh
what
my
it's
gosh,
like, yeah.
what it's like. It's a complete homecoming. It's really, you know, everything that you've held underneath settling because I settled so much in so many relationships. I knew I wanted more. You're settling in so many ways for, you know not asking for your needs, not asking for your wants, not even honoring your body or listening to your body and allowing her to feel the pleasure. So it's like it's a complete homecoming to allow yourself to, first of all, experience it within yourself, because you need to experience it within yourself first before your partner. So for women, I invite them
Hmm.
into getting to know their body first themselves. It's not your partner's responsibility to please you. It's not. It's your responsibility to get to know you and your body, get to know your yoni, talk to your womb, touch your body, bring yourself pleasure. Like, take yourself on a date, dress up for you, dance for you, come home and love you so deeply and so completely, so that then you get to share that with your love. You get to, when I dress up and do an embodiment practice for my love, like, first of all, his jaw normally hits the floor, but second of all, like, I then get to be and feel everything I ever desired, which was to be so deeply loved and seen and worshipped So, in me embodying my energy, in me feeling into the sensations and aliveness of my beautiful Kundalini energy, that just ripples out. And then we get to do that dance together with both of our energies. So, it's like, it is worth it in every way of every day that you can then live a pleasure-filled life. And yes, I mean pleasure in orgasmic bliss and full body orgasms, but I also mean pleasure in the way that you move, in the way that you breathe into your body and feel softness, in the way that you eat food. The entire experience gets to be pleasurable when you come home to yourself and what's alive and what's within you.
Yeah, so beautifully shared. And that's exactly why I'm inviting, a broad variety of beautiful people onto this platform to bring your very real experience and share that because, I tend to meet a lot of women that are in that place of I don't really know if I can experience what I want with the partner that I have. Like they have this fantasy of some other man. And, as long as the ingredients are there in terms of the inner commitments and the shared commitments of, both individual commitments, but together, the vulnerability that it takes to open up everything you've described is the journey, is what I want to say. Like, yeah. So the Inbodied Woman, Susanna, this is the name of your work, and I get that a lot of women out there can look at someone like you who just shares so openly and is showing your body and dancing and just, portraying the pleasure and beauty and love that you actually experience in your life. Someone
Mm.
can look at your visual imagery of that and think, oh, it's so glamorous, it's so far away. But from what you've shared today, it's very hard won, actually, and you deserve like every drop of all of that pleasure and love that you are experiencing.
I'm going to just shower myself in that. Thank you.
And I want to say that I see you as a medicine woman, particularly in the alchemizing the shadow of that trauma, violent, being on the receiving end of that as a woman, transforming fully from that. Like you are such a catalyst for women that are on that journey of their own, as well as totally changing the trauma templates with a man
Mm.
to the beauty and love and sacred union that you now have. Like everyone listening, if you're called to work with Suzannah, how can they find you?
Yeah, so if you're on social media, Facebook and Instagram, I am the Inbodied Woman. So please do reach out. That's my main point of call at the moment, as I'm doing a lot of beautiful in-person offerings here with my rebirthing journey, and opening up a few extra spaces online to work with me on the beautiful journey that I offer through somatics, through embodiment. So that's the two main points of call at the moment where I'd love to. And please send me a message. I'm always available to connect, to chat. As I know, even in these conversations, it can bring up a lot, and women can have a deep connection through that field as well. So, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, thank you so much. I really, truly appreciate that beautiful shower because what I've found in the online space is sharing from where I do now is it can be met with a mixture of people. It can have the people that celebrate, it can have the people that think it's easy for you. And it's like, as you and I know, the story, the initiation that we have walked through, we were literally forged through the fire. Like I've often said to my clients, like, I didn't choose this work, like it chose me. And through my journey, I have the honor of holding space and walking with other women as they remember their true power.
Whenever I'm asked privately how you can get your partner into this exploration of living beyond patriarchal sex with you, my answer is exactly what I've put down in the show notes for you with this episode. The real invitation here for you as a woman or as a man is to draw what resonates from every single episode, to elevate yourself, to take action, and to tap into your very next step of what it takes now for you to live beyond patriarchal sex. Because you deserve to feel the love, the quality of pleasure, and intimacy that makes you the spell breaker of your bloodline, and to have the uninhibited pulse of Eros guiding you through the life beyond the matrix and into the fullness of your divine sovereignty.